All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into an incredibly intense, real-life emotional story that honestly sounds like it was pulled straight from a movie script, but I promise you, it's 100% real. It all kicks off with a simple concert ticket, but trust me, it very quickly spirals into a tense, complicated situation that forced three people to make a totally unexpected and highly controversial decision. So let's jump right in. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of the facts, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of our main subject today, a young woman named Maya. Ask yourself, how far would you genuinely go for something you desperately, passionately want to experience? Would you actually compromise your relationship for your favorite band? Keep that question rolling around in the back of your mind as we unpack this whole story. Okay, Section 1, the price of admission and rebuilding trust. So, to really understand the stakes here, you kind of need to know the players. Maya and her boyfriend, Ethan, had recently gotten back together after a pretty rough breakup. They're actively trying to rebuild their trust, but they have some fundamentally different interests. Maya and her absolute best friend, Lena, have been massive, die-hard fans of a specific K-pop group since middle school. I mean, to them, the music, the fashion, the sheer energy of it all, it felt like a world where they truly belonged. On the flip side, Ethan, he has a well-known distaste for celebrity obsession. He just absolutely does not get the hype. So when this massive K-pop group announced a huge concert nearby, this core difference between them set the perfect stage for some major conflict. Now, living in Southern California, yeah, it is not cheap. Money was incredibly tight for the girls. Missing this concert felt literally impossible to Maya and Lena, but the ticket prices were just brutal. For Lena, dropping cash on these tickets meant she'd barely be able to cover her rent for the month. It was that serious. So this huge financial tension was seriously threatening to keep them from attending the event of their dreams. But here is the massive kicker that changes everything. Maya knew that Ethan technically had the money. He'd actually recently inherited some property and savings from a relative, so the cash was quite literally sitting right there in the room with them. But it belonged to the one person who absolutely hated the very thing they wanted to spend it on. It's just the perfect storm for a massive moral and financial dilemma. Which brings us to Section 2, an unexpected arrangement. It all starts with a joking comment. The tension over these tickets eventually boiled over during what was supposed to be just a normal night hanging out. The three of them were joking around about the absolute insanity of the prices when Lena laughs and casually throws this out there. Honestly, I'd do anything for those tickets. Just let that hang in the air for a second. The moment those words left her mouth, the room just went completely, uncomfortably quiet. What was meant as a totally harmless joke instantly shifted the entire dynamic of the room, and a very real, very heavy conversation started. Now, to understand exactly why the room went dead silent, we need to talk about something called Maya's promise. See, Maya had previously told Ethan that if they ever managed to work things out and get back together, he would have more freedom in the relationship, basically to make up for some mistakes she had made in the past. It was supposed to just be this theoretical boundary. But suddenly, nobody expected that past promise to turn into a tangible, staring you right in the face reality.
So how did they actually navigate this? Well, it didn't happen in a snap, that's for sure. It kicked off with a ridiculously long, deeply awkward discussion. From there, they had to set some incredibly strict boundaries. Emotions had to be rigorously checked and just left at the door. And finally, an unimaginable agreement was actually made. Ethan would pay for the tickets, but in exchange, capitalizing on that promise Maya made about more freedom, Ethan and Lena would go out on a date. Yeah.
And this is right where the story completely shifts gears. The arrangement quickly stopped being about K-pop tickets at all. It morphed into this insanely complex psychological test for all three of them. Suddenly, they're navigating this absolute minefield of trust, jealousy, deep-seated insecurity, and honestly, even a little bit of curiosity. They were essentially testing the absolute utmost limits of their renewed relationship and their friendships. All right, moving on to Section 3, reality versus fantasy, the night before the big show. Because striking a deal is one thing, right? But actually executing it is a completely different beast. The anticipation leading up to the night before the concert built this incredible suspense. First step, dinner. Ethan actually takes Lena out, fulfilling the terms of their bizarre little deal. Next, at home. Maya stays behind. And you can just imagine the intense anxiety here. She was constantly checking her phone, overthinking every single possibility, wondering if she had just made the absolute biggest mistake of her entire life. Finally, the return. When Ethan and Lena got back, things felt different. Not necessarily bad, just deeply emotionally confusing for everyone involved. Maya's internal conflict that night was just off the charts. She had built up this theoretical fantasy in her head of being the cool girlfriend. You know, having this willingness to give Ethan absolute freedom to make up for her past wrongs. But the reality? Completely confusing. When Ethan actually returned from the date with her best friend, the situation wasn't dramatic. There was no screaming, no explosive reality TV show drama. It was just profoundly confusing to process. The reality of the deal didn't match the anxiety she felt, but it didn't match the fantasy either. But here is perhaps the absolute wildest psychological twist in this entire story. Despite the intense anxiety of the whole evening, seeing absolute honesty from Ethan instead of hidden secrets or sneaking around strangely made Maya feel closer to him. By confronting this wildly uncomfortable situation out in the open with complete and total transparency, it actually fostered this really unexpected sense of closeness between them. It challenged her entire understanding of their bond. So, the sun comes up and it's concert day. All three of them roll up to the venue together, honoring the original reason this whole messy thing started. The music was deafeningly loud. The crowd was absolutely electric. And yet, there was this emotionally suspended atmosphere hanging over their group. For a few hours, they just existed in the energy of the music. Nobody said a word about the incredibly complicated situation that had gone down just the night before. The elephant in the room was simply drowned out by the bass. Let's wrap things up with Section 4, the lingering lessons, looking at where they were months later. So, what happens months later when the ringing in their ears from the concert finally faded away? Well, the most direct takeaway is this: they absolutely never repeated the arrangement. This wasn't the start of some wild new lifestyle for them. It was a strict, one-time only deal, an isolated weekend born out of totally extreme circumstances and a very specific set of past promises. Nevertheless, that single, isolated event left a massive, lasting impact on how Maya views her relationship. Because the core themes Maya still thinks about to this day are super profound. The real consequence of that weekend wasn't about a K-pop concert ticket at all. It was about the immense emotional weight of navigating love, guilt, trust, and boundaries. The story really highlights just how deeply complicated these dynamics can become when people stop communicating honestly. But conversely, it also shows how radically raw honesty can alter a relationship's DNA, even when it's applied to a wildly uncomfortable, out-of-the-box situation. So, that brings us to the end of our explainer today. And I've got to turn the spotlight back over to you. Honestly, would you have made the same choice? When confronted with a messy reality, heavy financial stress, and the lingering weight of past relationship mistakes, would you have agreed to this deal? I want you to really chew on the complexities of love and trust we've unpacked today. Dive into the comments below and let me know your thoughts. I would genuinely love to hear how you would have handled this